to the Men on the Path to Love podcast, the history lessons, how to deal with a partner who won't let go of the past episode. I'm Bill Simpson, your host. I coach men who are struggling in relationship, how to communicate effectively, build trust, and deepen intimacy so they can be the best version of themselves in relationship and live the life they love. So a listener reached out to me and asked me what to do when his wife keeps bringing up the past. Well, it's a question that has come up a lot in my practice over the years, and I thought I would give it some attention. The bottom line here is the past is the past. It's history. There's nothing we can do to change it. The best we can get out of the experience is to learn from it and hopefully not repeat it. Where I find the problem lies when bringing up the past is when it's used as a weapon against the other person. And what I hear this happening a lot in my practice is when one person has cheated on the other. And this was the case with Jeremy, not his real name. He had been in a 3-year relationship with Janice, not her real name. They had both been going through a divorce when they met. And after he and his wife separated, Jeremy had moved out of the house he and his wife shared. They had 2 kids together, and he was often over the house to see the kids, thinking it was better to keep them in the environment where they were accustomed to, rather than having him over his cramped studio apartment. Well, at first, Janice was cool with it. She understood it was for the benefit of the kids and all that. Well, over time, it got to be a problem. To Janice, it seemed like Jeremy was spending way too much time at the house, and his ex was constantly calling him for something that needed fixing at the house or an issue one of the kids had. And when Janice would confront Jeremy, he would get all defensive and say it was for the benefit of the kids and that she needed to get over it. Well, that didn't go over well with Janice, and she started having her suspicions. Now, fast forward to one night when Janice texted Jeremy and he didn't respond. And when she called him, it went straight to voicemail. It wasn't until the next day that he responded. And when Janice asked him where he was, he said that he was at the house because one of the kids was sick and that he decided to spend the night. Even though that was true, it wasn't the whole story. The full story was Jeremy had a weak moment and he slept with his ex. And to make a long story short, Janice found out about it and was furious, obviously. Jeremy explained his weak moment and assured Janice that it would never happen again. And he decided he was going to move into a bigger apartment where he could have his kids over. And Janice had basically gotten over it. And eventually she moved in with him. For the most part, things were pretty good in their relationship. Yet when things got testy, Janice would bring up what happened, even though it was like 2 years ago. And it got to the point where she had brought it up a lot, and obviously she wasn't over it. Even though Jeremy had limited his interactions with his ex and established pretty strong boundaries, Janice would bring it up and beat him up for it all over again. And that's when Jeremy came to me. I supported him in how frustrating it can be to have the past shoved in his face over and over, and that it was unfair for Janice to keep doing it. I also explained to him how Janice must have felt, that he broke her trust in him by sleeping with his ex. Well, he got it. Yet he pushed back and said that he had apologized over and over and that he had been faithful ever since. Well, I understood all that, and I pointed out that obviously Janice still had feelings about it. And I asked him if he thought Janice would be open to meeting with the 2 of us to see if we could find some sort of resolve, And Janice agreed. When we met, Janice had shared how hurt she was back then. And she admitted that she would use it against Jeremy from time to time. She also said that she felt Jeremy was genuinely remorseful and that she trusted him for the most part. Yet she still had some unresolved feelings about what he had done. So I broke it down to both of them. I told them that in order for Jeremy to build his trust back, that Janice had the right to ask Jeremy any questions about what had happened, as long as she was asking in order to get clarity and resolution, not to use it in a way to, basically beat Jeremy up. Well, they both got it. And indeed, Janice had some questions, and Jeremy was quite open and transparent. Well, by the end of the session, Janice seemed to be content and told Jeremy that she forgave him and agreed that the only time she would bring it up again would be to sincerely get clarity and that she would no longer use it against Jeremy. And Jeremy agreed to answer any future questions she may have and to be totally transparent in order to maintain her trust. Well, it seemed like all it took was to have some awareness and openness on both parts to ultimately move towards the bigger picture of the long term of their relationship. So fortunately, in Jeremy's story, he and Janice were able to navigate these rough waters. Yet I've seen it too where couples drift apart because of past mistakes either one or both of them had made. And when past mistakes keep being brought up and there's no resolve, they do drift apart, and that can be really detrimental to the relationship. Now, here's what research says the impact of bringing up mistakes can have on a relationship, both short and long term. The first thing that comes to mind when past mistakes keep coming up is how it can break down trust. And trust, as I mentioned, is vital for the long run of the relationship. If you continually bring up past mistakes, it makes it really hard to forgive the other person and for the other person to forgive himself. And it gets in the way of moving forward and letting go of those negative feelings that were being harbored. It can shut down personal growth within the relationship. If past mistakes keep coming up, the other person may feel judged or criticized, which can affect their self-esteem and ability to improve and evolve within the relationship. If past mistakes keep being brought up, the focus can become more on the negative and lose sight of the positive aspects of the relationship. And this, in turn, can contribute to low relationship satisfaction. And it can even affect one's mental health. The emotional toll of having feelings of guilt, shame, anger, resentment, and frustration from revisiting past mistakes over and over. It can create mental health challenges like anxiety and depression. And the last thing I'll mention is how I see it affects a man's ability to be vulnerable. It's hard enough as it is as a man to be vulnerable. And when the fear of having past mistakes getting shoved in your face makes it even harder for a man to open up and be vulnerable. It goes both ways, really, yet especially for men. So how do you deal with it when your spouse or partner keeps bringing up past mistakes? Well, the first thing is to talk about it. Have open and mindful communication and be patient through the process. You'll want to listen to your partner to get a full understanding of how your mistake impacted them. Have empathy. Take responsibility for your mistake. Show remorse and genuinely apologize and ask what they need from you to move forward. All of this can help to build trust, which, as I mentioned, is crucial. Let your spouse or partner know the impact of what bringing up the past has on you and the relationship. And once there's an understanding of the impact of revisiting the past has, you can set some firm boundaries about bringing up the past and saying, no, we don't talk about this anymore. It's done. It's history. Work on forgiveness for both of you. Forgiving yourself for your past mistakes and forgiving your spouse or partner for theirs. The research suggests that forgiveness is a direct correlation to higher relationship satisfaction. So important. And if you can, you might try to figure out what the underlying issue or issues are that may cause them to bring up the past. Is it really about the past, or is there something underneath that, like using it against the partner to create disconnect? I don't know. So with bringing up the past, try to stay focused on the present and moving forward. Mindfulness can help with staying present. That's what it's all about. And making plans for the future and can take the trajectory forward rather than the past. And of course, after trying all this and you're still struggling with it, I encourage you to seek professional help. So hopefully now you can see what holding on to the past can do to a relationship, and how important it is to let it go and to move on. And I have to say, that's easier said than done. These wounds can run deep and make it hard to heal and move on. Yet moving on is vital for the relationship to work. Think about it. What good does it do to keep bringing up past mistakes? It's history. And once it's done, it can't be undone, right? So acknowledge the mistakes, learn from them, and try to focus on moving forward together. And if you just can't get over the past mistakes, then maybe it's time to get out of the relationship. It's not fair to keep beating up the other person or each other with the past while staying in the relationship. More than likely, it will sadly lead to the relationship coming to an end at some point. Here's a quote about forgiving the past from American theologian Lewis B. Smedes. He says, "Forgiving does not erase the bitter past. A healed memory is not a deleted memory. Instead, forgiving what we cannot forget creates a new way to remember. We change the memory of our past into a hope for our future." Yeah, forgiveness is the key indeed. And that will do it for this episode of the Men on the Path to Love podcast. The history lessons, how to deal with a partner who won't let go of the past episode. I'm Bill Simpson, your host. Thanks for listening. Hope you found it helpful. Now, coming up on the next episode of the Men on the Path to Love podcast, do you ever feel like you're alone in your relationship? You'll hear Darius' story about how he felt so alone with his vision and his dreams in his marriage, and with a little help, how he transformed his marriage and his life. A story to inspire for real. Please join me for the Together Yet Alone, Navigating Loneliness in Relationship episode. And if you have any suggestions or topics for the podcast, any comments you'd like to share, or have any issues in your relationship you need help with, please email me at bill@menonthepathtolove.com. That's bill@menonthepathtolove.com. And if you would like to schedule a free hour-long, no-strings-attached consultation with me, please visit my website at menonthepathtolove.com. That's menonthepathtolove.com. And remember, until next time, keep your heart open and stay on the path to love.